Morning, Wyatt. Well, it's 10 a.m., so I'm going to talk to you, and then everybody else can catch the recording afterwards. Good morning. It's good to have you guys here. This is the last school day of the week. Tomorrow and Monday, we are meeting as a staff. We haven't been doing a lot of meeting because the isolation's been going on. So tomorrow and Monday, we're all meeting as teachers electronically to kind of go over what the plans for the rest of the year looks like. And so we should be able to get a better idea as far as like what grading looks like, what finals look like, and all of those details. Know that the governor has made the decision that we're not going to be coming back to school personally during the course of the school year. For you guys then, what's going to be happening today and getting us into Tuesday is we're going to be wrapping up the Vietnam War. And when we take a look at the Vietnam War, it is a conflict that really does damage to us politically, to the point where if you take a look at where we are right now, you have Republicans and Democrats inside the country that very much treat each other like enemies rather than like fellow countrymen. And a lot of that comes from the divides that are created by the 1960s and the 1970s. You're going to see protesters adopting the tactics that were used by Martin Luther King to protest against African-American discrimination. They're going to start using that against the Vietnam War during Lyndon Johnson's presidency. You're going to see something created called the credibility gap, where we're going to have a Democrat in Lyndon Johnson and a Republican in Richard Nixon who will feel that because they have to win the Vietnam War so badly, they start doing dishonest things where they are not telling the truth to the American people about how the war is going. And that credibility gap is still with us nowadays. So if you know people who are suspicious about government conspiracies, or they're fearful about the government doing things to you or against you, a lot of that attitude comes from the 1960s, where there was a suspicion about what the government was up to during that time period. And a lot of that still has an impact on us nowadays, to the point where you have, during the Vietnam War, groups of people known as hawks, war hawks, who were in favor of being in the Vietnam War. And their feeling was that we lost the war because we weren't sufficiently enthusiastic about the war enough. And doves, who argued that the war was unwinnable, and they argued that the government was doing something that was immoral. And that ends up splitting the country quite heavily during this time period. And we're going to see that with both Lyndon Johnson and with Richard Nixon. At this point, then, also, we'll be wrapping up with Chapter 26 over the next few days. But then we'll be able to take some time on on Tuesday next week to talk through the content that you guys have been studying to make sure the Vietnam War is understandable. So for you guys, first of all, with the chat function that we have over here, you can totally type questions that you guys have or bring any sort of problems to me. But let me highlight for you what you're working on today and over the weekend, so that when you get to Tuesday, you can be good knowing that you are set to go. And in particular, what I want to highlight for you is with this 4-day weekend, I don't plan on putting a lot of work on you over that weekend for two different reasons. Number one, for my AP biology kids, you are 2 weeks away from the AP test. And what I would really encourage you to think about if you're an AP biology kid is you should be taking a look at the video series. Sorry, let me go right here. If you are an AP biology kid, you should take a look at the video series that they have got on YouTube that is helping you to get prepared for the AP test. This is the one that they've got for my AP US history class. But if your biology teacher has not been steering you towards this website yet, they've got a playlist that's going on right here that has been reviewing content to help you get ready for the biology test, for the redesign, and also they're explaining what you do and do not need to know as far as these different areas of your study. But if you've been really worried about what's coming up with the AP test itself, on Monday and on Wednesday at 3 p.m. our time, they are planning on giving you a chance to do a timed test to practice what it would be like to be under the time constraints for the College Board when that test pops up for you in 2 weeks. Your test is on May 18th. And then you'll notice that they've got areas right here where the day afterwards, next Tuesday and Thursday, they will actually help you to score out your writing to see how you're doing compared to the College Board standards. So if you're an AP Bio person, you don't need a lot of extra homework over the weekend for US history. You should be really working on your content knowledge and getting yourself into a good spot. For you guys today, what I'm going to have you do is if you finish with your chapter 26 text assignment, you should be submitting that today so that you can get credit for the work that you guys are doing. You guys also have the final element of the America in the 20th century, Vietnam Ed puzzle that I would like you to watch for today that will guide you through your video worksheet so you're able to get that finished and submitted. I'm going to want you to have the video watched 100% and the video done by Tuesday. So on Tuesday, we can do some document analysis. We can look at what's going on with the media during the time period. And in particular, we can start taking a look at why did we make a move in United States history from a very liberal time period. We're going to find that during the period of the 1960s, there's tons of change for civil rights, and we declare war on poverty. And we're going to find that during Lyndon Johnson's time period, there are a lot of substantial changes made. We add Medicare, we add Medicaid, we add Head Start, we add public broadcasting television with Sesame Street. We create the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, both the one in 1964 and the 1968 Civil Rights Act. But by the time that we get to 1968, you're going to see protests in the streets and you're going to see militancy taking place. And like you saw with the civil rights movement, where Martin Luther King's nonviolent approach was very much challenged by a more militant group. And what I saw from your writing, there were a lot of kids who started writing about how the civil rights movement became more violent. Instead, the big thing that's happening is with like Malcolm X, he's arguing the idea that being nonviolent is only going to get you so far. And he's arguing that there should be the threat of retaliation if you attack African Americans. And so for Malcolm X, his famous viewpoint was he would prefer to be nonviolent, but he also wanted the right to bear arms, to own guns. And the argument was that if you try to slap him, he plans on attacking you back, with the idea that you shouldn't be attacking him. He shouldn't be attacking you. There are some people, though, who will take that to the next degree and they will start engaging in violent protests. They will get involved in like attacks or vandalism or other sorts of things, with the argument that at a certain point, change is only going to happen if you're disruptive and doing illegal things. But for many Americans in the United States, they're going to get turned off to that. And in particular for Richard Nixon, he's going to get elected because he claims to represent the silent majority. So for Richard Nixon, if you've heard President Trump recently talk about how he's a law and order president, and he's trying to maintain laws on like immigration and crime and whatever, that phrase isn't new to him. It was used by Barry Goldwater in 1964, and especially Richard Nixon in his elections, where Richard Nixon claimed that he represented people who looked and acted like me, people who were like middle-aged, who couldn't go out and protest and wouldn't go out to protest because, number one, they were patriotic Americans who obeyed the laws. But number two, he argued those people were too busy working jobs, taking care of families, doing things the way that they should, in the ways that were seen as normal back in the 1950s. So when Richard Nixon gets elected, he promises to end the Vietnam War with a victory, but then he also promises to bring back those old values that we had during the 1950s of like patriotism, obeying the law, not being disruptive, not being a troublemaker. And in that group of troublemakers, he sees African-American civil rights leaders, other civil rights leaders, kids who are protesting like hippies, and anti-war people. And so you're going to see a backlash during the 1960s and 70s against people who are protesting against the Vietnam War. And many of those Vietnam War protesters will get more aggressive because they're seeing the government do things with their credibility gap, where they will tell a story about how great the war is going, and then it will turn out that the war is not going great. Or they'll draft people into the war who can't figure out sneaky ways of getting out of fighting, while also rich and powerful people can figure out ways to dodge the war by either being involved in being involved in education like college, or else they'll figure out medical excuses for them not to go to war. And so this is going to be a really disruptive conflict where in the 60s and 70s, we see a lot of what we call polarization, where people start moving away from each other. And that period that we had with like Harry Truman and Dwight D. Eisenhower, where Republicans and Democrats were fairly moderate with one another, kind of in the middle, we now see them moving away from one another. And if you've noticed nowadays, Republicans and Democrats really have trouble tolerating each other, talking to each other, getting along. A lot of that has been happening over the past 50 years as part of what you see happening in the 1960s. So for you guys today, watch the Ed Puzzle for part 3 of the Vietnam War that you can find right here. Watch it to 100% completion, and when you get done, submit your video worksheet through Schoology, and you can see that link right here. Also, please turn in your Chapter 26 text questions so I can see the work that you've done. And then if you're one of my AP people, make sure that you're checking out the publications from the College Board, because they are trying to keep you up to speed. Otherwise, then relax, enjoy your 4-day weekend. And then when we come back together on Tuesday, I should be able to give you more details as far as how this class will wind down over the next month and what our final details look like as far as our agreements and decisions that are made at the district level for how we wrap up e-learning as we move to the end of the year. Your chat is now open. You can also open up your microphone if you have questions. If you have no questions and you're good, make sure you fill out the attendance today to make sure that you are given credit for being here. And enjoy your weekend, guys.
Mr. Hohenstein.
Yeah.
So I have a question about my chapter 25 notes.
Yeah.
So I was unable to submit them when they were due like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I sent you a Schoology message.
Yeah.
Not sure if it got through, but
I'm sure it did.
What?
I've got, you're an AP Bio, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of like those guys, I've been overwhelmed and even more so because our entire test is now writing based. And so DBQs that I've been having my AP kids do, I'm a little bit behind in checking out messages, but I'm gonna be diving into those today.
Okay.
So were you unable to submit through Schoology still?
I can try again. I tried it twice, like right when it was due.
Yep.
And so I instead like sent you a message, and then I think I shared it with you on Google Drive as well.
So are you in period 6 or period 7?
6.
So I've got it open right now.
Okay.
If you try submitting currently, and then I'll watch for it to come through, and then I can give you feedback about if it gets through.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So just hang with me, fire it through right now, and then I'll hit refresh, and I'll be able to give you an update in real time, and it's taken care of immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.